go from overweight at middle age to one of the fittest people on the planet? My name is Elizabeth Alfano, host of the TV show, web series, and podcast, The Dinner Party. Former entertainment lawyer turned ultra athlete and vegan podcaster, Rich Roll joins me on The Dinner Party today as we dish on getting ourselves and the planet back in shape. A bit more about my guest. In May 2010, Rich and his ultra colleague Jason Lester accomplished an unprecedented feat of staggering endurance many said was not possible. Something they call the Epic 5 Challenge, an odyssey that entailed completing 5 Ironman distance triathlons on 5 islands of Hawaii in under 1 week. In 2012, Rich became the #1 best-selling author with the publication of his inspirational memoir, Finding Ultra, Rejecting Middle Age, Becoming One of the World's Fittest Men, and Discovering Myself. Picking up where the book leaves off, in 2013, Rich launched the wildly popular Rich Roll podcast, which consistently sits atop the iTunes top 10 lists. What is amazing in all this is that in 2006, Rich didn't even own a bike. So this podcast is going to be a wild ride through the incredible journey and turnaround by this previous couch potato. Over my homemade Brussels sprouts and chickpea salad in a heavy mustard dressing and a deconstructed smoothie turned salad of butternut squash, avocado, banana, and raw pumpkin seeds, we'll discuss his dramatic turnaround, the politics behind eating healthy, what the industry doesn't want you to know about eating animal products, and his new book, The Plant Power Way. Grab a healthy snack and listen in. After a quick word about podcasts, I'll be right back with ultra endurance athlete and plant-based nutrition advocate, Rich Roll. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast, The Dinner Party with Elizabeth Alfano, on iTunes. Just search for The Dinner Party, or if SoundCloud is your thing, you can find me there too by searching for The Dinner Party. Subscribe and you'll never have to hunt for great, engaging interviews again. They'll just land on your computer or your iPhone every time a new podcast comes out. So subscribe now to The Dinner Party podcast with me, Elizabeth Alfano, because the best conversations really do happen over dinner. So, if you don't mind, in between bites, tell me about your story, because you weren't always vegan or even a big athlete. I mean, in college you were an athlete, but...
Definitely not. I was an athlete in college. I was a swimmer at Stanford back in the 80s, but when that chapter was over, so went the athletic career. And you know, I've had many ups and downs in my life. I've struggled with alcoholism and addiction. Got sober at 31. And in the wake of getting sober after a 100-day stint in rehab, which is a long time to be in rehab.
Is that a long time?
Okay. It's pretty long, you know, it's pretty long.
What's the usual rehab time?
Usually people go for 28 days or something like that, right?
I see.
So I'd stay a little bit longer.
Why?
But I'm glad I did, because, you know, I had some problems.
Yeah.
But
stand in line.
That was a great experience. It saved my life and gave me a whole new set of tools to orient my life around. And in the wake of that experience, I became very focused on trying to repair all the wreckage of my past. You know, I destroyed a lot of relationships. I was unemployable, and you know, I just had a lot of stuff that I had to sort out. So I kind of threw myself into recovery, and also as a byproduct of that, workaholism. You know, trying to get back on track. And I was able to achieve that. By the time I was 39, I was a senior associate at a prominent law firm, and you know, married and building a family and living in a beautiful home. And from the outside looking in, everything looked great, but I really wasn't taking care of my health or my wellness, and certainly not my fitness, for a very long time. I transferred a lot of those addictive behavior patterns onto unhealthy lifestyle habits. I was very much a junk food junkie. Every single day, McDonald's, Jack in the Box, Pizza Hut, Taco Bell, takeout, Chinese, like that kind of stuff, and working long hours.
Yeah.
And so by the time I was 39, I'd put on 50 pounds and was really just kind of lethargic and apathetic about my life and a little bit depressed, not like chronically depressed or anything like that, but just kind of like a classic couch potato, I call it hurtling into middle age. So I was sort of having a little bit of an existential crisis because I was very unhappy in my professional career, and that kind of coincided and butted up against a health crisis that really crystallized shortly before I turned 40, when I had this episode on a staircase late one evening where I had to basically take a break walking up a simple flight of stairs. I was winded, out of breath. I had some tightness in my chest, and heart disease runs in my family. And it was a very scary episode. And it was kind of like the lights went on. It was very similar to the day that I woke up and decided today's the day I'm going to go to rehab. Like, I just knew there was like a window of opportunity where I had like a flash of willingness to like make a change in a profound and really significant and specific way. And so that was kind of the epiphany moment that led to everything that has followed. And it certainly wasn't overnight. It was a protracted evolution, but I found my way towards eating plant-based, and that was something that just agreed with me in a really compelling way, and also in a way that I could not have anticipated or expected. Like, I didn't believe or think that removing animal products and all these processed foods from my diet was going to make that much of a difference, but it really did. It was very profound, and it really revitalized me in so many ways, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and of course physically, in a pretty short period of time. Within several weeks of going 100% plant-based, I felt like a completely different person. And what the sort of impact of that was that it really allowed me to get in touch with just how incredibly resilient the human body is. Like, if you treat it right, it will actually respond.
It's trying to help you out.
And very quickly. And I thought, wow, that's amazing. And literally 4 or 5 months after making this switch, I'd lost a tremendous amount of weight. I was exercising again. Like, everything in my life had changed. And that really planted the seed for me starting to question the limits that I impose upon myself. Because if I could change so dramatically in just 3 or 4 months, what am I actually capable of?
Right.
And I really became obsessed with that question. And that's ultimately what led me into the world of ultra endurance sports, because it's this amazing template that you can really push yourself, up to and beyond the limits that you set on yourself, physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. So that was the allure, and the training and the racing was really my way of seeing what I could do, and also trying to grapple with this existential crisis that I was having. And I was doing it not because I wanted to see, how fast I could be or how many people I could beat, but I was trying to answer these own questions for myself about like what I wanted to do with my life. And I couldn't have anticipated that it would lead me towards sitting with you today, doing this, but it's been kind of an incredible journey.
Well, so in many ways, your life, the beginning of the story is like so many people I know. They sort of, as you say, hurtle themselves into middle age. They become couch potatoes. They become lethargic. What they're eating makes them so disinterested in life because they don't feel that great. And so they come home from a long day of work where they probably had a very crappy lunch because it had to be fast. And then they're exhausted by the end of the day, and therefore they're just disconnected with life and their own spirit, let's say. So that part I hear a lot of. But I don't hear a lot of, today's the day I'm going to rehab.
Right.
Or today's the day that I turn it all around. And then you do. So what was it about that day that you, so I understand the event on the stairs, but what was it about the day where you said, today's the day I go to rehab?
Well, I had been sliding into a very dark place for a very long time. It was no secret that I was an alcoholic. Everybody around me knew I was an alcoholic. Yeah. I'd gotten 2 DUIs in a very short period of time. I was looking at jail time. The universe was conspiring to destroy my life, and put it right in front of my face that I needed to do something about it. And so I was actually struggling with trying to get sober, but I was trying to do it my way. Like, I don't need to go to rehab. I'll do this. And in my mind, everything that I had everything positive that I had achieved in my life was a result not of some kind of innate talent, but I have this reservoir capacity to work very hard.
Yes,
I know
that
how
I
to,
get.
and that's how I was able to make my way as a swimmer. I was never the most talented swimmer. I was never the most talented student, but I knew how to study really hard. I knew how to train really hard, and I was able to bridge like a talent deficit gap by doing that. So I thought that I could apply this self-will to my addiction problem, and that would solve the issue for me. And the more I tried to do that, the more I continued to fail, and the deeper that hole continued to get, until I finally got to this point where I realized I was going to have to do it a different way, and I was going to have to avail myself of the help of other people. Like I was going to have to ask for help, which I didn't want to do.
Right.
You know, I'm very like sort of resilient person who tries to solve their problems on their own, and asking for help is not easy. So it was really an evolution of getting to that point where I became willing to entertain a different way. So with that comes a certain level of open-mindedness and setting aside, you know, it's like getting in touch with the idea that my way got me to this point, maybe I should try a different way.
Something else.
And I think that mindset, or having success with that, allowed me, when I was on the staircase, to say, you know, what I'm doing is not working. My idea of how I should live and eat is not working. Maybe I should try something different.
And what did you learn about yourself in this process?
What didn't I learn?
Right,
You know, what
okay.
didn't I learn? I don't even know where to begin with that. I mean, I learned so much about myself. You know, I learned that you know, I can be my own worst enemy, and I learned that my perceived strengths are also my greatest weaknesses. You know,
Your ability
my
to work,
facility,
work.
yeah, like that can be my own undoing as well. And so I had to find a new way to not deny that this is my constitution, but find a more positive and healthy outlet for those proclivities.
So work within what you've got, like not work
Yeah, I
against
mean,
it.
people will say, oh, for you to go out and do these crazy ultra endurance races, you're just transferring your addiction onto a different template. And you know, there's some truth to that, of course. You know, the ultra endurance races are a great repository for a lot of people with addictive personality tendencies. So, of course, I'm going to be attracted to that. But, you know, taking the drink or pulling into the drive-through, those are always easy decisions to make. You know, that's the easy way out. And getting up early in the morning to go train, or you know, eating the thing that's a little bit out of your comfort zone because it's good for you, those are more difficult things to do. This is really good, by the way.
I'm glad you like it. I'm glad you like it. I'll just say that was my dog doing that big slurping, people. So I have a big Mastiff, and that was not either of us. Well, so is there a pitfall that you had? Because I imagine it wasn't a straight trajectory. You decided one day, and then every day was better, better, better. I mean, I'm sure you, or I'm guessing, you tried, and then 2 steps up, 1 step back. 1 step up, 2 steps back. 3 steps up, 4 steps up, 2 steps back.
4 steps back, 1 step forward is
right.
probably more accurate. Yeah, I think there's this perception, particularly from people looking from the outside in towards whether it's athletic performance or healthy eating, and especially eating vegan, plant-based, that the people that espouse this lifestyle somehow snapped their fingers and overnight made this change and have always done it perfectly. And I can tell you that that is not the case for anybody that I know, and certainly not the case in my own experience. You know, it was, you know, the struggle towards evolving towards a plant-based diet was, you know, a 6-month evolution of making a lot of mistakes and then stumbling around in the dark and trying to figure out what worked for me, and then making mistakes and then trying to, you know, make the next right decision. It's very much not a linear thing whatsoever.
Life's not linear.
No, life is
know.
not linear.
Yeah.
And, you know, in the arc and evolution of my career trajectory professionally, that's been super messy as well. You know, we went through a financial dismantling when I decided I didn't want to be a lawyer anymore, and it's definitely been a struggle. You know, I call it the warrior path. So it's interesting because when you look backwards, it looks like all the dominoes line up perfectly,
Right,
and
yeah.
you know, there's this,
Yeah.
you know, you were fated or destined to do
Yeah.
these things. But when you're in the midst of it and struggling and trying to find your way, it's very disorienting and confusing, and there's, you know, many dark nights of the soul, and moments of uncertainty.
I feel like it has to be that way, because if it were easy, you wouldn't get the big growth.
Of course.
So it's got to be, you know, a struggle. Otherwise, there's no real moving forward, advancement, I would think.
And you have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, because
Yes,
that's the
all the
only way
time.
that you can ever change or grow. And so when people say to me, oh, well, you know, it's easy for you, but, you know, I just couldn't do without cheese, or it's easy for you, but, you know, you don't know what my life is like. Like, I just think that that's convenient excuses, that if you really want to change your life, you have to really, you know, look at your priorities and make some tough decisions about how you're spending your time, and be willing to try new things and get uncomfortable. And, you know, the new normal only comes through the habit of doing something that's outside your comfort zone long enough until it becomes incorporated into, you know, what is normal, and, you know, and evolving into, you know, what ultimately can become your daily routine. Because now I don't think twice about eating plant-based. Like, it's just natural for me, and I don't really give it that much thought.
Well, so that's something that I wanted to ask you about, because in a way you've lumped a lot of things into one big conversation. So I get that alcohol was bad for you. It's probably, realistically, if we look at it, it's not great for everybody. So, but okay, it affects some people differently, some chemical issues as well. So, you know, I understand that you would say to yourself, my life is really going in the wrong direction, and alcohol's a big part of that. But what led you to say animal products are a big part of that?
Well, the way it worked for me, and I can only speak to my own experience,
Sure.
was that after that staircase incident that I described, the first thing I did was a 7-day vegetable juice cleanse detox, which was completely out of my comfort zone. I'd never gone a single day in my entire life without eating solid food, but it was sort of detox or rehab for food, right?
And it was only liquid.
It was like, okay, I went to rehab for alcoholism, and I had to go through a detox period and then learn, you know, intuit a new toolbox. So how do I apply that experience to food and diet and lifestyle? And so that 7-day period was like my rehab, right? So I was like, it allowed me to wipe the slate clean. And, you know, the first couple of days were horrific. I was lying on a couch. I felt like I was detoxing off heroin. It was terrible. You know, I literally was like, my wife was like, oh man, like, you look terrible. You know, I literally was detoxing off of all these horrible foods that I was eating. But, you know, if there's one thing I know how to do, it's how to weather a detox. And I knew I'm just going to stay in it, allow myself to be uncomfortable, and I know that this will change. And, you know, day 3, day 4, day 5, by day 6, I started to feel really good. And by day 7, I thought, I'm just going to continue this juice
great.
thing forever, because I feel so amazing. I couldn't believe in a week.
So high on juice.
Yeah, I was literally getting high. Like, in 1 week, I could feel dramatically better. It was crazy.
How was
and
your
then
sleep?
It became, well, it was erratic at first. Like, I had a couple sleepless nights, and then by the end of the week, like, I was starting to like acclimate. You know, the body is resilient. It will adapt. And so after that, I was like, okay, well, I do have to start eating food again. So how can I eat? What am I going to eat that's going to allow me to feel this good all the time? And that was kind of like the agenda. And that's when I started playing around with a couple different diets. And, you know, I was a junk food vegetarian for a while. I tried a bunch of things, and nothing seemed to be working. And, you know, 6 months later, I was back on the couch feeling lousy. I hadn't lost any weight. My energy levels had plummeted again. And I was starting to lose hope and, you know, frankly, ready to just give up. I was like, well, I'm 40. Maybe this is just how you feel when you're 40. I'm getting old, blah, blah, blah. But at that moment, I was eating vegetarian. I'd gotten rid of meat, but I was still eating tons of dairy. Like, it's funny how the brain works. Like, denial is a very powerful thing. And
Sure.
Denial is something I'm very familiar with because of my experience with addiction, but it's equally applicable in diet and lifestyle. So, you know, I was convincing myself that I was eating healthy because I was vegetarian, but, you know, I would eat Pizza Hut pizza, just not with the pepperoni on it. Or I could eat, you know, a whole bag of Doritos or it's like, oh, but I'm vegetarian, I'm healthy, and but this is not working, so maybe healthy eating doesn't work. That's an illusion, right? So I had to snap that level of denial and say, well, what would happen if I got rid of, I've gone this far, what would happen if I got rid of all the animal products, because I was so addicted to cheese, I just love cheese. I'm gonna get rid of that, because I knew every time I ate cheese, I felt lousy later. So I was like, I'm gonna get rid of that, and I'm gonna get rid of all this processed stuff too. Let's see if that works. That was like my last ditch effort. And I didn't think it would work. I didn't want it to work because it sounded extreme. I was like, well, what's left? I'm gonna crawl around in the yard and chew grass out of my lawn. Like, it just sounds terrible. But I was desperate.
Oh, no, wait, that's not vegetarian.
And I know that heart disease runs in my family. And if I didn't sort this out, I was gonna have a big problem. Yeah. So I was highly motivated for my health, for health reasons to figure this out. And, that's when I had that moment of realizing, 7 to 10 days into this phase of things, how much better I felt. Mm-hmm. And then that really cemented, like, wow, this is working. Now let me educate myself and figure out how I can continue to do this.
So just to play devil's advocate, because it seems that you are making all these decisions for health reasons, not maybe social reasons. And I'm sure we'll get to that in a second. But do you think you would have felt this good if you'd cut out all processed food but kept animal products? So if you get rid of Doritos and Snicker bars, but you still have free-range chicken, what do you think?
That's all hypothetical and speculation. Perhaps, but all I know is that I felt amazing without any animal products in my diet and without any processed foods. And when I began to educate myself, when I began to watch documentaries and read books from doctors like Dr. Neil Barnard, Caldwell Esselstyn, how to prevent and reverse heart disease. I read the China study. All these incredibly brilliant research doctors and scientists have worked very hard they've done tremendous amounts of research and study. And there are undeniable links between the ingestion of animal products and health concerns, because right now, our society is in the midst of an almost unspeakable healthcare crisis where like 70% of people are obese or overweight. By 2030, they're predicting that 50% of Americans are going to be diabetic. And heart disease, of course, is America's #1 killer. 1 out of every 3 people is going to die of heart disease. And so when I looked at Dr. Esselstyn's work, and it's very clear, he has before and after angiograms in his book, that eating a 100% whole food plant-based diet can not only prevent heart disease, but also reverse it, can reverse plaques in your arterial system, reverse atherosclerosis. That was very compelling and profound for me. And so, that's enough information for me to stay the course. And again, I was just experimenting on myself. And all I knew is that I felt amazing doing this. And for the first time since I was a kid, I had this level of vitality and energy and enthusiasm for taking care of myself again.
So I will add to that I do it primarily. I came to cutting out animal products primarily because I want nothing to do with factory farms. And the more I learned about factory farms, the more I just thought I cannot be a part of this kind of cruelty and hormones and horrible living conditions and ingesting all that anger and pain and cruelty. And when you know better, you do better, and we can't pretend we don't know. So obviously factory farms are horrible and I want nothing to do with them. So I vote with my dollars, and I'm not voting that way. And I think food is becoming, if we want to see any of the changes that we're talking about, you're talking about it from a health perspective, I'm talking about it from a social perspective, it's going to have to be a political issue. So I vote with my dollar. That's how I get my voice heard. I'm hoping that we're going to see more and more of it in politics, actually, because it's very hard to have a health policy and then not have your agricultural policy in line.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
What's the point of a health policy if your agricultural policy is...
The choice to what to put on your plate is most certainly a political act, and it's a very profound act, and it's actually an act that we can all take that has massive repercussions. So although the health considerations were the original motivator for me getting into this, I have since become much more interested and sensitized to the other issues, the ethical implications of factory farming, of course, and also the environmental implications. So, factory farming is an absolute abomination. I'm convinced that, if our species can survive, that 100 years from now, we will look back and be appalled at how we're treating these animals.
Yeah.
And our system for feeding the planet is broken, it's unsustainable,
right.
and it's incredibly deleterious on our dwindling natural resources. So the question then becomes, as population continues to swell, they're predicting that by 2100 there's going to be 11 billion people on the planet. How are we going to feed everyone, right? And there's simply not enough land or resources to continue down this path of factory farming. And quite frankly, free range animal harvesting and grazing is not a solution either, because if there's one thing that factory farming does very, very well, it's create incredible economies of scale.
Right.
That animal is around, takes up the least amount of space and consumes the least amount of resources possible to blow it up into something that we can all eat. But when you're looking at free range, it takes a lot more land. Those animals live longer, they live better lives, but they're consuming more resources. So we need more water, we need more feed. And so that only exacerbates the problem. It's actually less sustainable than factory farming. So it's not a simple solution. But the truth is, every day that you make that decision to swap the animal products off your diet and replace them with plant-based foods conserves a tremendous amount of resources.
Right.
I mean, it takes 660 gallons of water to produce a quarter-pound patty of beef, and 1,000 gallons of water to produce 1 gallon of milk. Like, these are crazy numbers. And here in California,
tell me those statistics again.
660 gallons of water to produce a single quarter-pound patty of beef. And this is all from the USDA report from 2008, and it's all laid out in a documentary called Cowspiracy that I'm involved in. I'm one of the producers on that movie. The amount of, here in California, we're in a water crisis, right? We're all told as consumers that we should reduce our showers, that we can't water our lawns, but consumer water use only amounts to 5% of all water use combined. And the truth is that animal agriculture consumes the vast majority of water, for not just raising these animals, but growing all the grain and the feed to feed them.
Right.
At the same time, we're raping and pillaging the rainforest at the rate of like 1 football field every 1 to 2 seconds. And this is the planet's source of oxygen. This is the lungs for the planet. We're in the midst of a mass species extinction as a result of this depletion. The runoff from animal agriculture is polluting our rivers and our lakes and our oceans. These ocean dead zones are gigantic problems. So
plus
the
the
whole
emissions
thing,
from cows.
the emissions. We all feel good about driving Priuses or electric cars, but
barely a dent.
But actually, animal agriculture is much more impactful and damaging to the environment than all of transportation combined.
Right.
So it's a big thing, and we feel as consumers all too often disenfranchised. Like, who does it matter who the president is, and does my vote really count? Like all these things, it's very easy to feel powerless. But the one thing that we can control is what ends up on our plate. And when you do make that decision and you do swap out those foods, you're saving all kinds of water, you're saving an animal's life, you're conserving land, you're conserving, you're preventing
resources,
carbon emissions. Like all these things are they're meaningful and they're real.
Yeah, and who's gonna, particularly if you have kids, I would think you would care about this.
Of course, because kids are much more sensitive to these things than we are as adults, because we've just been living the way we've been living our whole lives, and we're programmed.
Well, and they're getting the planet, which is just gonna be a mess with all the people and all the environmental issues. I mean, they're inheriting a real problem. So let's talk a little bit about, so now we're knowing what you eat. What about how much you work out? So are you still in training for an ultra event of some sort at the moment?
I train every day.
Define train.
First I'll say I try not to plan anything in the morning before like noon, because that's my time to kind of take care of myself. I'm not training for any races right now. I haven't raced since 2011. I still do it for the love of it, whether it's swimming or cycling or running or yoga. I meditate every morning, and I'm much more interested now in maintaining a level of fitness and vitality for purposes of longevity.
Okay.
When I was racing, I'm not sure that training 30 hours a week and just destroying my body for performance reasons is in the best interest of longevity. I wouldn't say that I'm retired from racing. It's possible that within the next year or so I may tackle a challenge. But I think that when I was racing, a big part of the motivating factor of that was trying to answer these existential questions about my life. I feel like I've answered those, and as a result of the success that I've had in that arena and the things that have followed, like the books that I've written and the podcast and the public speaking and all the things that I do, I've gotten to this place now where I've cultivated an audience that's very interested in these issues, and what gets me out of bed in the morning and excited is how to serve that audience and how to be helpful to people, right? So how can I serve? How can I raise raise consciousness, raise the level of awareness around these issues, and empower and help other people to make their version of the change that I experienced? And I think if I was to train for a race and I'm training, if I was to suddenly say, you know what, I'm going to train for this race 25 hours a week, whatever it is, there's no more podcasts, there's no more public speak. It's like I can only do so many things in a one-day period. And so for me, the advocacy is just much more important to me now. So I'm willing to, to live my life in accordance with that.
So let me ask you, you said that longevity is really what's fueling you now, and that these incredible workouts work against that. I would have thought that they work with that, but actually you're saying that maybe at some point anyone's body has a cap of like how much exercise is good. Is that right?
Yeah, I think when I was training for Ultraman, which is for your audience, everybody knows what an Ironman is, but for people that don't, an Ironman is a very long triathlon, which over the course of a day, you swim 2.4 miles, and you get on your bike and you ride 112 miles, and then you run a marathon all in one day. It's crazy long.
It's crazy and insane.
Widely considered the ultimate test of human endurance, but I specialize in a race that's twice that long called Ultraman. It's a 3-day double Ironman distance race where over the course of 3 days, you circumnavigate the Big Island of Hawaii, which is about the size of Connecticut. The first day is a 6.2 mile swim, followed by a 90-mile bike. The second day is 171 miles on a bike, and the third day is a 52.4 mile run, like a double marathon. So training for that and then racing that, like where I'm pushing myself to my absolute limits and beyond, is stressing the body in a very significant way that I'm not so sure, in the long term is something you want to perpetuate over the course of many, many years.
So how many hours do you work out a day?
It varies, but I'm probably putting in about somewhere between 10 and 15 hours a week right now. So
okay, it's almost 2 hours a day.
Yeah,
almost. And does yoga count? So like an hour and a half yoga class, does that count?
Of course.
It does. Okay, and how often do you do yoga?
Right now, not as often as I should, but don't tell anyone.
Right, I won't tell your wife in particular, who
Yeah.
probably knows. But
I love yoga. I haven't been doing it enough. I got to get more consistent with that.
I hate to say this, but yoga is something I always tell myself, when jogging gets too tough, I'll do yoga, because it doesn't hold my attention in the way that jogging past something beautiful on the beach will, or that thrill that I get from going somewhere during my workout. So yoga just doesn't captivate me. I know that's because I'm not present, probably.
I think you should reframe your perspective on that. I think a lot of people approach yoga from the perspective of exercise, like it's a workout, and that's really not the purpose of true yoga. All of the asanas, the poses, the series of postures that you put your body through during the course of a yoga class are not really intended. They have the sort of positive benefit of toning your body and making you fit, byproduct, but that's not really the point. The point is you go through those series of postures to prepare your mind for the shavasana, the meditative aspect at the end. So it's almost like a series of of exercises that are specifically designed to anchor you in the present and calm you, so that when you get to that meditative, the meditative section that always comes at the very end of a yoga class, that's when a lot of people pick up and leave, when it gets to that part. The whole point is that, that's the focus, that's the whole game there. So it's not about exercise, it's really about meditation.
My recollection, and I haven't taken a yoga class in like 2 months now, but it's gonna be that at the end of the yoga class, that meditative state is about 60 seconds, maybe 2 minutes.
You're going to the wrong class then.
Okay, how long should it be?
How long should it be?
Or how long is it?
It should be hours. But yeah, I think it should be at least 20 minutes.
Oh.
Yeah, when you're lying on your back at the end.
Oh, that's not my recollection.
Which class are you going to?
Well, there's a class in Santa Monica, Yoga Works or something. That okay, I'm going to revisit yoga because I know that if I can hit the right note with yoga, I know that I would like it. I just haven't been able to hit that note. And I think what you've said in this podcast is you keep stressing that this is what worked for you and that this is what worked for you. And in the end, it really is something that everyone has to find their thing that works for them. One thing we didn't really talk about when you were deciding, because you had almost a life-threatening issue on the stairs, you were deciding like, okay, today's the day that I, get this together. You stopped working, right? So that had to dismantle your finances. And I think that's where a lot of people get tripped up is they say, I've got a family of 3, 3 kids and a wife, or maybe I'm going through a divorce and like financially, I don't know how I'm going to fit in a workout.
Right.
Like it's the time that it takes to, to make the right choices on your own plate. You have to cook, you have to shop for the right things. If you're in California, maybe you get lucky because there's a lot of vegan restaurants here and a lot of, healthy options. But if you're in Chicago, where we're from, not so much. So it's a bit of a time issue if you're, having to head to the office for 10 hours a day.
Well, there's a lot packed into that question.
Yes.
I mean, I'll take the first aspect of it, which is, the time component. We all have time. When people say they don't have time, I don't think that they're being honest. If you took a journal with you and wrote down what you did every 15 minutes throughout the day, every single day for a week, I think you would be appalled at how much time is wasted either on Facebook or doing nothing, or maybe commuting across town to go to a meeting that you didn't really need to go to, or to have lunch with a friend. It's really a question of priorities. So how important is it to you? And if it's important enough to you,
you'll do it.
Then you'll make some changes. And
Right.
I think we can all free up 30 minutes, if not an hour in our day to, take care of ourselves. So there's that aspect to it. In my case, I didn't stop practicing law until my first book came out in 2012. So, for example, in 2009, when I was training for Ultraman, I was writing my book, Finding Ultra. I was practicing law. I was training 25 hours a week. So I was literally like, when you're training at that level, that's a second job.
Yes.
So, and I have 4 kids.
Right.
So I'm not a single guy.
Right.
You know, so, and that was not an easy period of time. So I had to remove everything that was not essential in order to do that. Like I couldn't go out and hang out with friends or go for casual lunches. Like I was extremely focused to achieve those goals because they were important enough to me.
Right.
In terms of expense and time, time consumption with respect to the diet, I mean, every grocery store sells produce, so there's this idea that eating plant-based is a 1%er thing. There has to be a lot of fancy vegan restaurants around, or I can't make it work, and that's just nonsense. It's the simplest thing ever. It's eating plant-based foods close to their natural state. When you go to the grocery store, you shop on the extreme ends, you avoid the middle aisles, and it may sound initially, when you're not sort of vetted and up to speed on how to do this, that it's going to be boring, but it's not at all. Like I found my taste buds have come alive. I actually look forward to the foods that I'm eating. I mean, my wife's an amazing cook, which makes it a lot easier.
Yeah,
I will grant that.
So I have to talk about your book here because I see lots of cookbooks, and I like to cook myself, And being vegan is very new for me. I started it, I never liked meat, but I was always eating yogurt and cheese. So having none of that for me is as of January of this year. And I love your book, the amount of creativity that goes into the recipes. And they're not tricky recipes, but it's the plethora of options. I think people tend to think, oh, that means lettuce and tomatoes for the rest of my life. And it's so much more than that. So it's really just a beautiful book too, so many gorgeous pictures.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, the idea behind the book was to sort of invert the assumption that a lot of people have about what it means to be vegan or plant-based. You're going to be some hippie and you're just going to be pressing wheatgrass all day, and you're going to have to plan all your meals way out in advance and spend all day in the kitchen and all this kind of stuff, which is not how we live.
Right.
We're busy. My wife is an amazing cook, but she's doing a lot of stuff too. Like, she's not spending all day in the kitchen. So we wanted to present it as an aspirational and accessible lifestyle. So we put a very modern spin on it. We tried to make the book much more like a coffee table book that you could leave out and peruse through instead of hide it in your cupboard in the kitchen. And all the recipes, the vast majority of them, not all of them, but the vast majority of them can be prepared in 30 minutes or less. And it's very family-friendly fare.
Right.
It's not like, super precious, particular fancy stuff. It's like potato salad and like vegan lasagna and,
I gotta try that recipe.
The untuna wraps. Like, Julie came up with this recipe. It's almond and celery based, like this paste, and it tastes remarkably like tuna fish. It's unbelievable.
Wow.
So we make sandwiches with that, or wraps, and all this stuff, has to work within the construct of our busy life and also please the palates of our kids.
4 kids.
I've got kids that are now they're 8, 12, 18, and 21. Some more finicky than others, and I'm happy to say they're all completely plant-based now.
Wow.
They all love, we cook out of this book, every single day, and it's been very effective.
Protein. What about protein? I know you get this question all the time.
Yeah. Well, yeah, not a day goes by where I'm not asked, where do you get your protein?
Right.
It's the number one question that everybody asks and everybody wants to know. There are so many misconceptions about protein. We're in this culture where we're being pushed this protein message everywhere we look. We go to the grocery store, every single food product on the front has a big, bold, capital letters, how much protein is in there. And the undeniable implicit message is that more is better, right? Like, if you don't
get 40 to 60 grams, right, a day?
Drink like a giant protein shake within moments of waking up in the morning, then how are you going to possibly breathe air in and out of your lungs? We need massive amounts of protein, and it's just not true. It's not true. First and foremost, we actually don't need that much protein, about 10% of our calories. And if we ingest an excessive amount, that puts a lot of strain on our bodies, on our kidneys. It's very acidic, which leads to chronic illnesses. It's just not good for you, right? We don't process it all the more protein you take in doesn't mean that you're suddenly going to build giant muscles or recover more quickly in between your workouts. More is not better. And on top of that, when we're talking about protein, what we're really talking about is amino acids, right? Those are the building blocks of protein, and in particular, the 9 essential amino acids. Those are the amino acids that our bodies cannot synthesize on our own. We must get them from the foods that we're eating. And when we eat animal products, we can get those 9 essential amino acids, but those animals generally get it from the plants that they're eating. They're eating lower on the food chain. So when I'm eating plant-based, I think of it just as eating lower on the food chain. Right?
Oh, I like that.
And the truth is, lots of plants have plenty of the essential amino acids. Lots of plants are high in protein. If you just randomly grazed on plants all day long, you would have absolutely no problem whatsoever meeting that recommended daily allowance and then some. The World Health Organization actually recommends far less, like 2 to 3% of calories come from protein. So I get my protein in the same place that some of the fiercest, strongest animals on the planet get it, like the gorilla, the Cape buffalo,
rhinoceros.
What else? The rhinoceros. Those are all plant-based animals. They're herbivores. Nobody asks them where they get their protein. I get it lower on the food chain. And I've been doing this now for almost 10 years. I'm coming up on 50 in October. I still train hard every single day. I've never had any problems building lean muscle mass. And I would say that eating plant-based is almost a secret weapon for me, because I am convinced, and you'll hear this with every single athlete that adopts a plant-based diet, that they feel that their bodies recover more quickly in between workouts. And when you're an athlete, recovery is the holy grail of performance. The more quickly you can recover, repair your body in between your training sessions, then the more quickly you're going to improve. And when you protract that out over the course of a season or a number of years, that translates into tremendous performance gains. So I know that it allows me to train harder, bounce back more quickly, avoid overtraining or losing training because I get sick or injured. And I've been able to do things as an athlete that far exceed my wildest dreams of what I thought I was capable of. So, that's all I can say about that. And I think that the protein issue is a gigantic red herring. Everybody gets caught up in it. They're obsessed with protein, and it's the wrong thing to be focused on. What you should be focused on is your micronutrient intake and ingesting more fiber. We're in the midst of a massive fiber crisis. People are not getting enough fiber in their diet. They're getting plenty of protein. Do you know any doctor that's ever treated a patient for a protein deficiency? Doesn't exist, right? But so many of the chronic illnesses that we're suffering from are a result of a diet that's deficient in micronutrients and deficient in fiber.
Because it's not moving things through your body.
Yeah.
So that's what I think of for all my big greens, is that it helps to sort of push things through the body, which is so great.
That's a big part of it, yeah.
I'll just say before I ask you the next question, because I know that you have interviewed him as well, Russell Simmons. Mm-hmm. And I interviewed him not too recently. And I'll just say, I hope that people go and listen to both of our interviews with him. He was so great. So when I asked him this question as well, no beating around the bush. He tells it like it is. At least in my interview, that's how he was. And he just said, it's just bullshit. Mm-hmm. And it was great to hear that refreshing.
The protein thing?
Yeah.
It is bullshit.
I just love that, I feel and I want to ask you this question as well, how people respond to you when you say you're vegan, or in my case, I say, absolutely, I want nothing to do with factory farms. I'm not eating animal products. And then people go on this like, oh, you tree hugger. And I feel that society just isn't willing to accept the negative information that is there about these issues, and that we in general are encouraged to take those criticisms about being vegan or wanting to support animal welfare and just respond in kind with, well, you should consider, or perhaps, it's another way of thinking. And I just love that Russell didn't do that. He just said it's complete bullshit and it's horrible. And it's bullshit and it's horrible.
It is. And we live in an amazing time, because we have these things in our pocket.
Yes, right.
That
Called
can
phones,
provide
people.
answers to so many things. And we have a universe of information now available to us whenever we want it, right? Which didn't exist when we were kids.
Right. So now no excuses. Can't pretend you don't know.
When you start to pay attention to the way the world really operates, it is quite eye-opening when you begin to realize the extent to which incredibly powerful lobbying groups that are buttressed by legislative action on the Hill are compelled to reinforce these paradigms that are, basically destroying our planet and making us sick for the sake of corporate profits. There is a reason why in public gymnasiums there are Got Milk posters. Why is it that milk is being advertised to young children in a public institution? How does that happen? It happens because of lobbying, because these animal agriculture concerns are incredibly powerful, and they whoops, the dog's got.
I didn't realize that he wanted back in, because he wanted out before. I didn't realize that. Come in, sweetheart. So go ahead.
So, in turn, that influences the food pyramid. These are all political, right? And when you start to wake up and go, wait a minute, like in my own personal experience, my whole life I've been taught beef is what's for dinner, milk does a body good. Yeah. When I got rid of those foods from my diet, I felt better than I ever had. And then my whole worldview turned upside down. I'm like, wait, what's happening? My whole life I was told these things. My experience is actually quite the opposite. That it's like taking the blue pill in the Matrix, and you start to realize, like, what else have I been told that might not be true? And you start to do your own research, and you run the risk of turning into a crazy conspiracy theorist person.
Yay!
But I'm telling you that so much of what we've been taught about nutrition, about diet, is simply false.
Well,
right?
What's so surprising to me is people are so reticent to see it from a different perspective, and they're
Because
the
food
only,
is very emotional.
but they're the only people who gain anything. So it's a very strange logic to say, absolutely not. I want to kill myself early, and don't you tell me not to. I mean, it's a very strange perspective.
Never
to be.
underestimate the extent to which people will accept good news about their bad habits.
I see what you're saying. Yes, right. Yeah, sure, because change is tricky. Change is tricky, absolutely.
And it in terms of the psychology of it, it's very difficult too, because if you challenge somebody's dietary proclivities, that touches an emotional chord, right? Because it's
Food
about
is
their
emotion.
relationship with their mother
Yes,
and what
yes.
it means to be loved, and all of
Yes.
these things are very tricky.
Yes.
And also this sort of power dynamic begins to exist, where it's like, oh, you're telling me that your way's better than mine, and who are you to tell me that? And so your natural emotional response is to resist.
And all these biases that go with it. So, oh, if you're for animal welfare, then you must be this kind of person.
Mm-hmm.
You don't wear shoes, and you probably don't pay taxes. And I mean, like
All
these,
that's changing,
yes,
though.
Right.
All that's changing. We're in a very interesting time right now. We're on the verge of a tipping point with all of this, and
I know.
all you have to
It's
do
exciting.
is look. I mean, yeah, it's easy because we're in Venice, and you can
Right.
throw a rock and hit a vegan restaurant.
Yay!
But that is starting to trickle out, across the United States and across the world. And I think that, if we don't make changes in how we produce food on a mass level to feed the planet, we're all going to end up plant-based whether we like it or not,
Right,
because we're going to run out of land to raise
Yes.
these animals.
Right.
And it is going to be only the 1%ers that are going to be able to afford beef
The
and
meat.
chicken,
Right,
because we're destroying the planet too quickly,
Yeah.
and we just can't continue down this path. And if, the reason that so many of these foods have, found their way so predominantly on our plate is in large part due to the farm subsidies.
Right,
The way
yes.
that we've architectured government and the way the economics of our food system works allows, fast food to be so cheap.
Mm-hmm.
And that creates habits that create an addictive response and lifestyles that are making us sick and are destroying the planet.
And that throw our health system out of whack. And so everyone's complaining about the cost of health care. Well, then stop feeding McDonald's.
75% of all healthcare costs are attributable to chronic lifestyle illnesses, 80 to 90% of which are easily avoidable, if not reversible, through simple diet and lifestyle alterations.
Right. I mean,
That's the
food is
truth.
medicine, in a way. The cheapest medicine you could ever get.
And we abdicate these decisions about our health to our
our
doctors.
lives, right, as well.
We don't really fully intuit how much control we have. We don't think that we can make that kind of change. And we ask our doctor, and he prescribes a pill, which is a whole other conversation about the pharmaceutical industry and how we've become, so, I don't know what the statistics are, but the statistics are crazy about how many people are on, basically on medications
Some
that are multiple
medication.
medications their whole life. And doctors are not trained in nutrition in medical school. And the whole profession of training nutritionists is funded by the meat and dairy lobbies. So there's so much
didn't know
bias that takes place in that as well. So fundamentally, we need systemic change. And the only way that we can make that change is really from the bottom up with consumer demand. And it goes back to what we were talking about earlier with that choice that you're making every single day at every single meal about
Right.
what you're putting on your plate.
Right, and I vote with my dollars, so that's how I feel there. But what's so strange, because the people who benefit are the people making the change. So it's amazing that people resist it, because it's sort of like saying, don't tell me not to chop my house down. I want to chop my own house down. I will ruin my own planet, and then I won't have any place to live. And don't you tell me that's a bad idea.
Paging Dr. Freud.
Yes, right. Yes. So let me ask you a couple other questions here. So as you talk about, like, you're heading into 50, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
And your plant-based diet, and you're still working out, an hour and a half a day, let's say. Do you take any supplements, any supplements for your age? So there's like the whole range of, I just take extra vitamin C, or growth hormone has become this big topic of like, is this good for you? Is this bad for you? I don't know. Anything in
The only supplement that I take is vitamin B12 supplement. Because B12 is very difficult to get on a plant-based diet. A lot of people use that as an argument to not do it. Like, well, how can it be a great diet if you need to supplement with B12? But the truth is, B12 is fostered in the microbes in the soil in which the plants are grown. We get it from animal products because they're chewing out of the ground.
I see.
And at one point, it used to be that a lot of the plants had B12 on them because we wouldn't wash them and sanitize them. So that's the main reason why that you need to supplement with it. When I initially went plant-based, I was so afraid of being, nutrition deficient that I had all kinds of supplements until I just got to a point where I was like, do I need any of these? I weaned myself off all of them. Occasionally I'll put some plant-based, vegan protein in a morning smoothie, not because I'm worried about meeting my protein needs, but if I'm training really hard and I'm not sure I really, ate enough that day, that kind of thing, but it's certainly not a daily thing. And when I weaned myself off of those, I didn't feel any different. I get my blood tested every 6 months. All my markers are fine. And like I said, I've been plant-based for 10 years. I'm not a doctor. I can't speak to, hormone, hormone replacement and all that kind of stuff.
I've just been hearing so much about it lately, like growth hormone stuff, like to help you heal as you get older, or any of those kind of things.
I think anytime you do that, you're throwing off your body's homeostasis. So if you're taking in growth hormone, then you're telling your body it doesn't need to produce any of its own. So if you stop taking it, then your body, is going to take a long, amount of time to kind of get back to the homeostasis of producing it on its own. So I'm always cautious about all those kinds of things. And I just try to live, as holistically as possible.
Well, and you talked about this a little bit, but I find like when I was 30, the first thing I noticed when I turned 30 was I just didn't heal as quickly. And of course, as I turned 40, I noticed that even more.
Yeah.
So you had said, as I noticed it earlier in the conversation, that you just feel on a plant-based diet, you are healing and recovering better than ever. Talk to me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, there's a school of thought that a lot of the chronic illnesses that we're suffering from, again, heart disease, diabetes, all these sorts of things, are related in some way, in some part, to chronic inflammation. They're starting to realize chronic inflammation contributes to these chronic illnesses. Well, what creates chronic inflammation? What leads to that is living your life in chronic acidosis. So when your body has to work very hard to maintain essentially a neutral pH, right? It's slightly based, but that pH is impacted by how we live, the amount of stress in our life, the amount of sleep that we're getting, the air that we're breathing, the sort of, toxins that we put on our body from, our beauty products or what have you, and of course the food that we're eating, right? All of these things contribute to altering our body's pH. And the pH in our body will stay the same, but in order to maintain that balance, our body has to do certain things to do that, right? So when you're eating very acidic foods, animal products, meat and dairy, processed foods are all very acidic, your body then has to go into hyperdrive to buffer that and maintain that pH. And what it does is it'll leach minerals out of your bones and all sorts of things. And that's ultimately what leads to down you towards on the path towards some of these illnesses. In contrast, when you're eating a plant-based diet, it's overall much more alkaline forming. It's anti-inflammatory. The acidic foods promote inflammation. Alkaline foods, clean air, stress reduction, good nights of sleep, all of those are more alkaline forming, which are anti-inflammatory and create like a buffer against leading you towards a lot of these illnesses. And so one of the reasons that a lot of people believe that eating plant-based enhances your body's ability to recover in between workouts is because when you're in this alkaline state, your immune system is functioning optimally. And that allows your body to expedite that process of recovery. So repairing your body, it's the same thing. Like whether you have a cut or you have a headache, whatever it is that you're trying to bounce back from, the principle is the same as your body repairing itself from exercise-induced stress to become stronger.
I see. So your experience here then as you roll into 50 is just generally stronger and feeling better than you have.
I feel like I'm in my 20s,
Really?
I really do. I feel great. I'm not going to swim as fast as I was, as I could at Stanford when I was 19 years old. I've certainly aged and I'm getting grayer every single day. So it's not about, reversing the aging process. It's about living your life on a daily basis as long as possible with the most amount of vitality and energy. Yeah, and I feel fantastic. I feel better now, certainly, than I did in my 30s.
So when you were 30, you probably didn't imagine where you'd be at 40, or let's say 37.
When I was 30, I didn't think I was going to live. I was drunk and passed out somewhere.
So things have changed.
Yeah, things have changed.
How do you envision your 50s?
I don't have like some grand goal of something that I'm trying to achieve. If I could tell you that if I won the lottery, I would just continue to do what I'm doing now, which is a pretty good indication that I'm happy doing what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I really just want to be able to continue to advocate and help as many people as possible. So whether it's through a podcast or a speech or all of these things are just different distribution platforms for communicating with people. So to the extent that I can continue and grow into the level of advocacy that I'm doing, that's what I want to do, because there are a lot of people suffering and the planet's suffering, and these people need help and the planet needs help. And the more voices that can contribute towards shifting consciousness and altering people's daily habits around food and lifestyle, we have the potential to shift things and save the planet, quite honestly. And it's dire. We're running out of time. I don't think people really recognize or realize the crisis point that we're at, and the time to act is now. So to the extent that I can inspire and empower people with the tools to make these shifts, I just want everyone to feel as good as I do. And the theme of my podcast is to help all of us unlock and unleash our best, most authentic selves. It's like, how can you live more authentic to who you are? And it's not about a diet. It's not about a specific workout. It's about stepping into a lifestyle that will help you self-actualize mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and physically.
Well, so the theme of my podcast is the best conversations happen over dinner, which is why we have still so much food in front of us.
Yeah.
I'll say if you'd like any more, definitely.
I'm going to eat more.
Oh, good. I'm glad. Please,
delicious.
I'll let you serve yourself then,
Yeah,
or if you
you.
feel like it. Because I'm going to ask you about what you have coming up, which of course is very food-based, your trip to Italy. So tell me what you have going on. I think it's May, I want to say 17th to the 25th, is that right?
Yeah, end of May. We're doing our first retreat, Plant Power Italia.
That's wonderful. Where in Italy?
It's at a Agriturismo, this beautiful villa
So
that's about
lovely.
halfway between Siena and Florence, called Isolana. And Julie and I, my wife, produced yoga retreats there back in the late 90s. So we've been to this location several times. It's absolutely stunning and beautiful. Owned by two Florentine brothers, and it's a working, olive farm and winery. It's just a phenomenal place. So this is our first retreat where we're taking a group of 40 people.
Wow.
And it's a week of transformation. So it's not just about helping people learn the tools they need to get plant-based in the kitchen, but also how to better communicate and how to unlock your creativity and be able to enhance your relationships with the people in your life. So we're tackling a lot.
Yeah.
It's going to be very intense, but we're also going to have an amazing time. And we're really excited about it. We're doing one also in October as well. So
that's good to know.
Yeah.
Do you know the dates in October?
October, I don't know the dates offhand. I think it's second week in October or first week. I'm not sure. So we're taking emails from people that are interested in reserving spots for that now. So if people that are interested and want to find out more about it, they can go to ourplantpowerworld.com.
Our, O-U, our,
Yeah,
O-U-R.
our Plant Power World.
B12.com. Okay, great. Oh, so you have 2 this year. That's wonderful. And yoga every day, I think, right? So it's
yoga, meditation, amazing food. We're going to take some day trips. We're going to hang out. We're going to eat amazing food.
that's the killer for me.
We're going next level.
Yes, right. Well, and so you talk about meditation. That's my next step, is somehow, if you think like I can't focus in yoga enough, I have so much difficulty like settling down for meditation. And yet everyone who does it successfully says that they do it twice a day. When they're in their group and when they're happiest, they're doing it twice a day, and that it is completely restorative for them. And they only do it like 20 minutes twice a day. So I keep thinking like, oh, come on, I can find 20 minutes twice a day. But I just haven't been able to get meditation under my belt.
Well, the biggest barrier that most people experience, and I heard you just say it, is you feel like you're doing it wrong or you're failing at it because like your mind is running a million miles an hour and you can't sit still.
Yes.
And so you're telling yourself you're a bad meditator. Right? But the truth is, my friend Charlie Knowles, who's a Vedic meditation teacher, has a great quote. He says, there is no failure in meditation. There is doing it or not doing it.
Right. Okay.
And so as human beings, you sit down and your head runs a million miles an hour. It's about accepting that and just trying to continually bring yourself back to the present and not flogging yourself or going into some kind of shame spiral because after 1 millisecond of quiet, you're back to what you have to get at the store and that person you got to call back.
Right.
Like that is the nature of the human mind. And so meditation it's called a practice because that's what you're doing. You're practicing. And I can tell you that, I am empathetic. I've struggled with this myself, but when I make that commitment, and it doesn't, for me, I'm doing it 20 minutes in the morning. I'm not doing it at night. I probably should do that though, because everyone who does that says it's amazing. It's changed my life, And so if you feel like you're stuck and you're, unhappy in your relationship, or you're creatively stymied, or you lack clear direction for your life trajectory, or whatever it is that you're dealing with, the best way to see yourself through that is to stop and prioritize meditation on a daily basis. And it's, we're in a culture where we want overnight fixes. Like, how am I going to hack my way, to the solution? And, nothing good, really comes that way. Like, if you make that commitment and it's not going to be overnight, 6 months from now, a year from now, your life's going to look a lot different. So I always say, when I'm heading into something exciting or something challenging in my life, I try to forecast myself into the future to the other side of it and say, when I'm on the other side of this, do I want to look back on that experience and say, what would that experience have been like if I had been meditating every day through that? Right? And that's something I learned in sobriety, because if you're really working your program, like what would it be like to weather whatever it is, good or bad, like the death of your mother, like if I was really sober and present during that experience, how different would it be? You know what I mean? So, as opposed to reactive,
but how would
agitated,
you know?
And irritable. No, what I'm saying is, I know what I'm like. My natural disposition is to be irritable, tired, aggravated, judgmental, like all these things, right? I have to practice certain things to not be that way. And when I am taking care of myself and practicing those things through exercise, through diet, through nutrition, through sleep, through meditation, everything else in my life falls into place and goes better, right? So when I'm heading into some kind of extraordinary experience, whether it's going to be negative, positive, challenging, or whatever, if I can be the best version of myself,
right,
the most anchored, the most present, the most accepting, the most non-judgmental, the most loving, all of those things, that experience, no matter what it is going to be better. It's going to be better, not just for me, but for everybody involved. You know what I mean? So when I look at it that way, it's easier for me to make that commitment and say, you know what, I am going to do it today. Even though maybe I won't feel any different today. I know that the accumulated practice of making that a habit over time will shift my paradigm.
Yeah, and the less you resist a situation, which is usually what happens when you're tired and irritable and you don't feel well and you're having this huge crash because the sugar that you ate at lunch is now gone out of your system, and so you've got this high, you've got this crash, and you're on this roller coaster. the less you resist situations, I find for myself, and the more you just kind of receive them, it usually ends up going much better for me. And I think meditation would help me in that.
Well, resistance is the source of all human suffering.
Well, then
So
there you
go.
go.
Yeah.
So I'm on to something there.
Yeah.
So let me ask you before we get to dessert, which is coming. So in addition to being vegan, I have a bunch of like tactical questions. So I thought juice was bad in the sense that you take all the fiber out of things by juicing.
I think of juicing as medicinal. Now, to be sure, consuming, large amounts of sugar in your diet is not a good idea, especially when that sugar either comes in the form of high fructose corn syrup, some other kind of processed sugar, or even too many pasteurized fruit juices. Like, I'm not advocating that you just, drink gallons of orange juice every day that you buy at the store.
Okay.
I think of juice as a very effective way to ingest a large amount of micronutrients and phytonutrients in a very condensed form. And the juices that I drink tend to be much more vegetable based than fruit based. So lots of dark leafy greens juiced, beetroot, which is great for endurance as an athlete, ginger, turmeric. These are incredibly powerful antioxidants, anti-inflammatories.
I know that.
So when I'm talking about juicing, I'm talking about cold pressed juice that you make in your home, predominantly vegetable based, and taken medicinally, 8 ounces, 6 ounces, something like that, once or twice a day. That's very different from, Tropicana at the Ralph's, right?
Right.
By contrast, that's different from making smoothies like in the Vitamix, because when you're juicing, you are removing all that fiber, right? And as we said earlier, fiber is extremely important in your diet. So as an athlete, I'm always, my calorie needs are a little bit higher than the average person. Our Vitamix blender is a great way for me to ingest a tremendous amount of plant fiber in a condensed, amount of volume, right? Because I can pack that Vitamix with all kinds of kale and spinach and beets and hemp seeds and chia seeds and berries and all these sorts of things, and drink it down for breakfast or, late morning snack. And it revives me tremendously.
Okay, so that was the number one. There's one of the suggested diets. It's not really a diet. It's more like a way of moving through the world.
The paths.
Yes, one of the paths, which is, sort of whatever one thinks their situation requires. So if you're looking for more calm, or if you're looking to restore, or if you're looking for lots of energy. And as I look at the Phoenix path, so the path of transformation. And again, what I mean by this, in this absolutely beautiful book, The Plant Power Way by Rich and his wife Julie, it says no oils. Now, I'm Sicilian. I live on extra virgin olive oil. Does that mean no extra virgin olive oil, or does that mean like no Doritos because they're in crappy oil?
No, it means no oil. So yeah, that path is for people that are in extremely poor health, or people that are suffering from heart disease or some other form of chronic illness. And that's anchored in the work of Caldwell Esselstyn, Dr. Neil Barnard, Dr. Michael Greger, a whole host of plant-based doctors who have studied this, studied nutrition and the impact on health profoundly. And when you look at Dr. Esselstyn's work, he's been able to reverse heart disease, but it's only when it's a very low-fat plant-based diet. So the removal of oils, oil, whether it's coconut oil or olive oil or whatever kind of oil it is, basically it's empty calories. It's extremely calorie dense.
Right.
1 tablespoon is like, 400
200
calories, something like that.
Wow.
Very calorie dense, but very nutrition poor. There aren't very many nutrients in that oil. It makes your food taste good.
Great.
Right?
Great. Makes your food taste great.
But you're not realizing how many calories you're taking in.
Yeah.
So that path really is for people that are looking to lose a tremendous amount of weight, or to really reverse chronic illness.
And so nuts go with that too. So you got to cut.
And so I don't eat a no oil diet. Like I said, my calorie needs are higher than the average person.
You're different.
But I use oil very sparingly.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, corn tortillas that are just corn, water, salt. Because I do a lot of Mexican kind of foods. I love avocados, I love salsa, I love things that are spicy. I love mushrooms, I like making mushroom tacos and corn tortillas.
Yeah. So what's the problem?
Well, there's a lot of talk that corn in general is not good for you.
Is it GMO corn?
Well,
depends on where the corn comes from.
Right, I guess. And it's also processed, right? To get a corn tortilla, even if the ingredients are corn, water, salt, it's processed to some extent because you've got a tortilla in your hand and not.
I don't have a big problem with that.
All right.
I don't have any problem
Keeping
with
it
that.
in, people.
Yeah.
I'm keeping it in.
Yeah.
So I'm moving on to dessert because this is my favorite snack, cookie dough. I could eat cookie dough all day long. Are you a sweet person?
I'm more like I crave potato chips much more than I crave cookies.
All right. So what's going to happen here is that you're going to leave.
But I like sweets.
Okay, so here's what's going on in this, which I was going to try to make into a cookie, but then I added too much tahini. So we're talking about oils. So I took tahini with oats, just raw oats, and mushed banana, and a little bit of honey, and some cinnamon, and I put it on top of a date.
Right.
And so
that sounds pretty good.
That's dessert.
All right.
And it's like a cookie bite, sort of, because it tastes like cookie dough on a date. So, but I won't force you if you're not a sweet person. But
can I eat this
now?
now?
Please,
All right,
please go ahead. So I actually ate a lot of this before you came.
Oh wow!
Do you see the problem? Is it?
Yeah, it's fantastic.
I don't know. It's my first day of making this. I've never made this before, but dates are fantastic.
Dates are so underrated. Dates are like, athletes, runners, they always buy these energy gels. They're just pure sugar, but
right.
I just put dates, I just bring dates with me. I had tons of dates.
God, that's good, I have to say.
No, really good.
So none of this was made with with recipes today. It just happened to be what we had in the house.
Whipped it up.
And I knew you were coming. So we kind of did just whip it up, actually. So I'm glad you're liking. So my favorite snack is cookie dough. What about you? Favorite snack?
Favorite snack? Let's see. I can't. You know what? It's so boring. Like I keep it super simple. Like I eat tons of bananas.
Yeah.
In my car, I keep bananas and almonds and dates all the time, and that's usually what I snack on throughout the day.
So good. It's like your own bar. That's like a bar, except it's a deconstructed bar.
I can't even eat like all those bars that you see at the store anymore. They're just too sweet for me.
To me, they're like basically glorified candy bars.
They are candy bars.
Yeah.
You think like, oh, it's a protein bar or it's like whatever. They're just candy bars.
It's just processed candy
Almost
bars,
all of
basically.
them.
I mean, so Marion Nessel, I heard her speak recently, and she was wonderful. And she just said, if you have any doubts, just don't. If it's in a package, forget it. Like, just get your own ingredients to the extent that you can. And that might mean somebody on the road who doesn't have time, you've got a banana and some almonds and dates, move on. Like, that's your candy bar right there. Okay, so a final question that I always think, well, everyone's going to see this question coming, obviously, because you're at the dinner party, but they don't. So if you need filler, we can give you some time to think of an answer. If you were having your own dinner party, dead or alive, who would you invite?
Oh, man.
Didn't see it coming, huh?
Yeah.
I don't know why.
It's funny because as a podcaster, I'm so used to thinking about guests all the time.
Sure.
I think that I would want to invite people that have the potential to influence culture, business, and politics on a mass level. Because I feel like if I could get them at a dinner party at our house and have my wife prepare them a meal and sit them down and spend 4 hours with them, at the end of that dinner party, I could fill their head with all sorts of stuff that could then potentially trickle down into political and policy, legislative, and economic change. So it would be leaders of business and politics, I think. So I don't even know who that would be specifically, but that's kind of where my head would be.
So that's really exactly why I do this podcast, because I do feel that food breaks down all barriers. And when someone has made something for you, it puts you at a different comfort level. And when you have that sort of open dialogue, and food sets the table for that, a different kind of conversation takes place, and that's really what this podcast is all about.
True.
So
talking about food is tricky, though. People, like we said
about
earlier,
food policy is
tricky. Well,
and
people's emotions get flared up pretty easily. So, I think when you talk about talking about food, it's also important to talk about how you're talking about food, because the way in is just as important as the message. You know what I mean? Which is why I think a lot of vegans get frustrated, because they see the world in a certain way, and they get frustrated that other people don't, and that's what creates that level of aggression and a mode of advocacy that isn't always effective in terms of getting people to shift their own perspectives on things.
So far, I like Russell Simmons' approach the best.
He's
just
great.
Calling a spade and saying, like, I'm not going to sit around and listen to this crap anymore.
No, and he's amazing, because he does
amazing.
Sit in a certain seat that allows him to influence culture and politics really in a very meaningful and profound way. And the fact that he does not mince words, and that he is such a great communicator, and he's so positive, I think is really powerful. And you know where it began for him?
No.
With meditation.
Oh, yes, that's right. He was one of the people who was telling you
go.
that he does it twice a day, and it's changed his life.
Yeah, we used to go to the same yoga class.
Oh, wow. Where's this then?
This was a long time ago. This is when I was when I was right out of rehab. I started going to yoga, and Russell would go to the same class. It was Maha Yoga on 26 in San Vicente with Steve Ross.
Oh, wow.
And that was, at the time, Russell was new to it as well, and he's gone on his amazing journey with it. And it's led me to some pretty interesting places as well.
Well, so I'm new here in Los Angeles, and he's the one who turned me on to Crossroads, that restaurant. So so many great options here. Well, Rich, thank you for joining me today. I appreciate it, and I've got doggy bags, so if anything you want to take home, don't leave me with cookie dough. So
thank you so much. It's an absolute pleasure to talk to you.
Thanks for joining in on The Dinner Party with me, Elizabeth Alfano. To stay in the know, follow me on Twitter and Instagram at DinnerPartyCHGO, and on Facebook at The Dinner Party and at Elizabeth Alfano. To subscribe to this podcast, find The Dinner Party on iTunes and SoundCloud and WGNplus.com. And if you want to send me an email about today's podcast or anything else, find all my info at thedinnerparty.tv. The Dinner Party editors are Michael Heidemann, Tim Barron, and Paul Velasquez. The original music is by the Websters and Ship Captain Crew. Thanks for listening today, and join me on the next Dinner Party podcast, where the best conversations happen over dinner.